Fairey Battle was a single-engined light bomber which saw service with the RAF from the late 1930s. Designed as a replacement for the earlier biplane bombers, it was found that the Fairey Battle was not much of an improvement and was considered obsolete by the outbreak of the Second World War. Although it had some success against the advancing German army in France, high losses of this aircraft meant that it was withdrawn from frontline service and found use as a training aircraft. Join me in this video as I build the Zvezda plastic model kit of the Fairey Battle in 1:144 scale. Hi, I'm Matt and you're watching Model Minutes. Before I start the video, as always, please remember that adult supervision may be required due to the use of sharp tools and toxic paints and chemicals. Zvezda generally recommends their kits for those aged 14 and over. I thought about doing a separate unboxing video on this one, but didn't see the point as there isn't really much to this kit. The small box features an image of two aircraft in formation over what appears to be the English Channel. It is indicated in the top right corner of the box that this is a snap-fit kit, and that glue is not required. One edge of the box gives a multilingual contact address for Zvezda, along with some symbols for various things. The other edge features a few more kits that are available in the range. The rear of the box has a number of pictures of a built but unpainted version of the kit, along with more information about the size of the model and number of parts. Upon opening the box, we are greeted by a number of things. Let's take a look at the instruction sheet first. The front of this A5 piece of paper holds multilingual information about the art of tactic game, which this range of model kits is intended to be used with. Towards the bottom it indicates the decal placement for the two versions of this kit that are included. The fact that the other side of the aircraft is not displayed will cause me a headache later, but more on that soon. The rear shows us how to assemble the model in only 3 steps, so this should not be a complicated build at all. It's worth noting that no paint scheme is included, so you will either have to take guidance from the box artwork or do some research for yourself. A 2-part plastic display stand is included, which slots into the bottom of the model. Always a nice inclusion with an aircraft model, but I probably won't use it with this kit for the time being. The black plastic parts are well moulded, with no flash being visible however. The decals are to a reasonable standard, but you might be able to notice some registry errors. The red dots in the centre of the RAF roundels are not quite central, which is quite annoying. Once you notice it, it's quite hard to unsee. The letters seem to be okay though, with everything there being legible. The clear canopy part comes in its own little bag. The moulding on this is quite well done, with all the various canopy frames being represented. The plastic is clear too, with no real scratches or blemishes. 2 brown plastic sprues contain the 10 remaining parts of the kit. A fair representation of detail is visible on this kit, but generally it's on the more simple side. Recessed and raised detail is featured throughout as necessary. The moulding quality is excellent though, with no flash being present. It's worth noting that no cockpit details or pilots or rear gun are included, so if you were to use this in a flying display you might have to source some extra parts or scratch build your own. The wheels in this kit can be displayed either raised or lowered, as there are different parts for those. Some of those parts are quite thin, so be careful when removing them and applying them to the model. The first thing I did was to remove all the components from the sprue. I did this using a knife to cut them away, or my snips in the more hard to reach parts like the propeller. Any leftover plastic can be sanded away using a nail file or sanding stick. You could give the plastic parts a wash in warm soapy water before doing this to help clean the plastic and improve the surfaces for when they get cemented and painted. But I couldn't find this suggestion in the instructions, so wanted to see how well this kit would build without doing it. I began the assembly by clicking the two fuselage halves together, then slotting them into the wings. Tamiya extra thin cement was run along the seams in order to help bond them together and make sure that they don't come apart again later. This process was repeated for the tailplane and then followed by the landing gear. The landing gear parts can be quite fragile, so be careful when getting them in place. The propeller slots into the hole in the nose of the aircraft, but I won't glue that in now in case I need to remove it later. With the very quick construction now complete, it's time to start painting. I chose to use this cheap black matte spray paint as a base for the aircraft. Also, from my research into paint schemes, I found out that the bottom of the aircraft should be painted black, so I won't need to do that again after this. I sprayed the entire model, attempting to apply an even layer of paint across the whole kit. With the black paint now dry, Humbrol 30 dark green matte acrylic paint was thinned with Tamiya X20A acrylic thinners, at a rough ratio of about 2 parts paint to 1 part thinner, but I did this by eye and didn't really measure it out. This will help make the paint flow better and dry without leaving brush strokes. It was applied to the entire top surface of the model using a medium brush. Humbrol 29 dark earth acrylic was also thinned, and then that was brushed on in a camouflage pattern similar to something I had seen in my research online. Humbrol 53 gunmetal grey acrylic was then used straight out of the pot to highlight the engine exhausts on the nose and the single .303 inch machine gun in the starboard wing. Humbrol 117 US light green matte acrylic was carefully applied to the cockpit area. Next, I used this satin varnish spray can to cover the entire model in preparation for the decals. A satin or gloss layer helps to provide a smooth surface for the decals to stick to and avoid leaving any silvering that can occur on a matte finish. The decals were then cut into more manageable sections, making sure that I picked the right letters and registration for the version I wished to depict. Next, they were soaked in warm water and left to detach from their backing paper. Humbrol Decal Fix was applied to the areas the decals were going to go, and this will help soften them onto the surface of the kit. When the decals were ready, they were slid off the backing paper and carefully positioned. A further coat of Decal Fix will help them soften further. Whilst the decals were curing, I used Humbrol 29 Dark Earth to paint the cockpit canopy frames using a fine brush. This could be quite difficult as there are so many frames on such a small part, so care and patience must be used here. This clear matte spray varnish was next to be applied, helping to dull down the slightly shiny satin finish and give a uniform look. Humbrol 53 Gunmetal Grey made a reappearance here, and it was used to paint the landing gear legs and the hubs of the wheels. Citadel non-oil acrylic wash was used to create contrast in the recessed details, such as any panel lines. It was applied with a fine brush, and then, after it had a little time to dry, the excess was removed by a cotton bud soaked in acrylic thinners. Had I not protected the model with the previous spray varnish layers, the acrylic paint scheme I had applied would also be removed at this stage. With the model now completely dry, the cockpit canopy was snapped into place. I thought about using glue on this too, but I found it fit quite snugly and decided not to bother. The propeller can now be added back onto the model, which I had removed earlier to ease with painting. The tips of the blades were then given a small amount of Humbrol 24 matte trainer yellow acrylic. And that's it. That's as far as I went with this little build of the Zvezda 1:144 scale Fairey Battle. I used this as a mojo build, as I hadn't felt like building anything for a while, and this would help me get back into it, as it's not complicated to do at all. Sometimes I find that doing something easy and simple helps you get that mojo back. The majority of the parts fit really well and just pressed together. The area that did cause me a headache though was the lack of guidance on the decals and paint scheme. I found that after I had applied the decals on the port side of the aircraft, the letters should actually read JHA and not in the order that I have applied them. I simply copied the starboard side, which was incorrect. But I'm scratching that up to the lack of information about that from the instructions, as the only view on those, and even the box artwork, is of the starboard side. I did manage to build this kit in only a few hours, and with the use of spray paints and acrylics, drying times were quite short, so I didn't have much waiting around to do, and could just crack straight on with it. One of the hardest parts though was the painting of the canopy. I found that to be a little soul destroying, and would imagine it could be a lot worse if you intended to mask it using tape. I'm sure you'd probably get a better finish if you did so, but getting all those tiny little bits of tape in the right place would probably have been a bit of a nightmare. Originally, this kit was released in 2014 as a new tooling. I'd say that is reflected in the build and mould quality, as it pretty much goes together without a problem. But I found that the detail was somewhat lacking in comparison to other kits in the same range. This kit retails for between £2.50 and £5 in the UK at the time this video was made, which if you can get it somewhere around the lower end of that range, it's definitely worth getting to build up that little 144 scale Air Force. There are only a couple of areas that this kit is really let down in, and the first is in the decals, which, although apply to the model quite well, they did feature those annoying registry errors. The second would be the instructions, with the previously mentioned lack of painting scheme and guidance on where the decals are supposed to go, and that will result in a few points being knocked off. Generally though, this was a neat little kit to build which helped me get back into the mood for modelling, and it would make a great basis for a diorama or for modifying in different ways if you can get it cheap enough. But let me know, would you get one of these for yourself? As always, any comments on my build technique and finished model are welcomed under the video, as well as any suggestions you might have for future models or videos you'd like to see. Honourable mention to my patrons over on Patreon, whose incredible support allows me to continue making these videos. To find out more about patronage and the perks it gets you, take a look at the links in the description. Don't forget that you can connect with me on my Discord server, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. Oh, and if you're new here, please consider clicking that subscribe button to be notified of any new videos I might make in the future. All that's left to say is thanks for watching this quick video on Zvezda 1:144 scale Fairey Battle, and I'll see you all on the workbench again next time.